Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Freeman, CEO here at the Dr. Bob Kemp Hospice, and welcome to our Children's Grief Awareness conversation. Before we get started, here at the Dr. Bob Kemp Hospice, we would like to acknowledge our place is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt. It was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the credit of the First Nations. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, North America, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history and the land so that we can better understand the roles of our residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. We stand in solidarity with the murdered, missing Indigenous women, girls, transgendered, and two-spirited people, and we grieve with them. Today, I am so excited to introduce a most amazing video. Leading up to today, Children's Grief Awareness Day, we created a video called The Voices of Grief of Children. Today is our official launch of this video, and we want to thank the children who participated. We interviewed 8 children, ages 8 to 14, who have had experience of a death of a loved one. We asked the children several different questions. What do you need as a griever? What have been the best and worst experience with grief? What would you like adults to know about your grief? And here's what they told us. Technology is always our friend. We did a run through, so we're just going to wait for that. While we wait for that to come on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Susan Ripa, Manager of Children's and Family Bereavement Services here at the Dr. Bob Kemp Hospice, who was actually the lead for this amazing project that we put together. And Sue, when you think about this project that you put together, can you tell us a little bit about what went behind it and why it was important to hear from children?
Well, I think my experience with the kids to date has been that they feel that they're just not heard. And so what we wanted to do was provide them with a voice and give them an opportunity to say all the things that they're feeling, but are afraid really to say out loud. And they are so eloquent in this. I look forward to when we can see it, because the kids were, the impetus behind it was just the importance of being able to allow them an opportunity to speak and to share their voice. I see that we're ready to go.
All right, let's try it.
My name is Sarah. I'm 11 years old and my dad died of a heart attack last year. Sometimes kids like me can't express their feelings into words, so they don't tell their parents or something. That's just the way I'm processing it. Me and my sister grieve the loss of our father in different ways. Not everyone grieves the same way.
Hi, my name is Grace, and I'm 9.5 years old, and my dad died when I was 4. He died because he got cancer. Every Friday when he came back from work, he'd get us a little treat. Well, sometimes on Father's Day, I'll sometimes feel different. Sometimes I have fears that something's gonna happen to my mom. Sometimes on his birthday. I'll sometimes cry, and on Father's Day.
Hi, I'm Ethan. I'm 8 years old, and my stepbrother died 1 year ago. His name was Zane, and he was a baby. The next day when he died, that made me sad. Well, it's because if somebody's usually sad, that makes me sad.
My name is Cooper. I am 12 years old, and I lost my baby brother when he was 18 months old, and his name is Zane. I loved whenever my baby brother was laughing because I would always make him laugh. First few months I was sad. I used to not be able to even sleep. The hardest thing was not having pictures of Zane.
Hi, my name is Abby. I'm 14 years old, and I've lost 5 people in the last 4 years. Most of them died from cancer or brain tumor, but one of them was killed. The best thing someone told me is that it's gonna be okay, I'll help you through it. The worst thing that someone told me was to get over it, or that you haven't talked to them in a while. One thing I think adults should know is that not to pressure them to talk about it, because that will just make them more upset about it. I found talking to someone outside my family helpful because they don't know everything about me, and it's much easier to talk to a stranger than to someone that you're really close with, because it feels like you might hurt them.
Hi, my name is Joey. I'm 11 and a half years old. My dad passed away 2.5 years ago. And I miss him every day. Well, I haven't really had anything bad said to me about Dad, and that I'll never get over it. And we would normally make a card for him and burn it so that the message would go up to him in heaven, even on just normal days. I'll never get over the fact that I lost him. But Christmases and birthday parties, feels like something's missing whenever, in every Christmas and birthday, kind of feel like something's missing. And I think that would be my dad. I feel it's better to talk about it rather than just to leave it be. Whenever I talk about my dad, I just feel better about myself, about my loss, but not completely over it. Actually, not even close. Someday they'll feel the same pain that I do about losing my dad. I want to think about Dad so I can remember him in such a way that I feel he's right in front of me. I don't think I have to get over it. Yeah, it's something that you get to control, but I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want to let go of me thinking about my dad.
Hi, my name is Tiana. I'm 14 and I lost my brother Tyler due to cancer. There's been things where it's best and worst, because sometimes people will tell me I look like him, and that can be the best or worst thing because I miss him very much and I know I look like him, but it's very hard to look in a mirror and say, there's the person that you lost. I find that it's the most common one, but I know or understand. It's different if you actually know what the person's going through, but if you don't understand, that can be really hard for them to hear because they went through something so tragic. It's very common for people that I'm around with to bring up his name because I still talk to a lot of his friends and I'm family with them, so they like to talk about him a lot, and it's very hard sometimes because they don't realize I'm his sister. So it's very much more harder for me than it is for them. There's some days where I prefer not to talk about it, not to have anything brought up about him, and then there's some days where I want to talk about him. Lots of different ways that kids can handle grief, and they just have to realize that.
My name is Jaden. I'm 11 years old, and my dad, Oliver, passed away in 2018. I like talking about some of the stuff that he did and some of the things that I did similar to him brought a smile to my face. I liked when people gave me the choice to talk about it or not, and it wasn't really forced, because there's times where it gets a little too emotional, or maybe times where I'm just not in the mood. That it's always different. There may be a kid that maybe finds it not too emotional, but still at the same time it may be pretty big for them, and maybe a kid that finds it really emotional and it is really big to them. For me, I may have a different mindset about it than another kid, or maybe another kid has more information or kind of experiences with other people with the same problems. So I would like them to know that it's always different, and that maybe the way you speak to certain kids isn't going to be the same way for every child. I did tell a couple of my friends, and their reactions were kind of, I wouldn't say fake, but I feel like it was nice to have them know about it, but I know at the same time that not a lot of them had experienced the same thing maybe. So I didn't really want to tell everyone and have people, refer to me as a kid in school with the dad who died, and I just wanted to be looked at as the same. Your loss is your loss, and how you deal with it is what you think. So if anyone else tries to tell you a certain thing, it's not really your choice or their choice to say what you should do, because everyone experiences it differently, and we all kind of have our own knowledge to what we should do and what we maybe think isn't a good idea. I had still been able to call him and FaceTime him, but I didn't have the opportunity to do that on that Father's Day.
Wow, it's so powerful and beautiful. Well, Sue, when you see this, these children and you work with them, and what comes up for you? What do you think about?
Well, I just think how brave and courageous they are. They've been honest and authentic. They've spoken their truth. They were eloquent, and I really feel like we need to listen. Those are the important things. Grief is such a taboo subject, and even though it's a normal part of living, and we're not taught that grief is a normal reaction to loss. And it's not just about the loss due to a death. It can be the loss of our freedoms, like during the pandemic, or the loss of relationships or connections. And one of the things we try hard to address is the notion of grief literacy. And if we can talk about it and we can prepare people for grief, then they're better equipped to manage it. And we don't do them a service by not talking about it. Absolutely.
And I know that, just to jump on to that theme that you're talking about, that this is just a regular part of life. When we look at, there's about 300, just over 300,000 births in a year in Canada. And there's about 297,000 people who died. So we're always, as part of living, we're entering new lives, and some lives are ending. And so when you look at, I was looking at the stats around Ontario, in the last year, 100,000 people passed away. And what we know is that most people are attached to at least 9 people. So that means this year, there's approximately almost 1 million Ontarians that are grieving what we call the first year of a loss. And we have to know that those are children who are also part of that grieving process. So I think, there used to be this idea that, children shouldn't talk about it. We don't talk about it. Don't bring children in. And so from your experience, and what do you think that kind of thought process does to children when we don't include them, or we say, don't talk to the children about it?
Well, I think that, as I said, I don't think we do them a real service if we don't talk to them about it. And what we're telling them is, this is bad, don't talk about it. If people think that, I think parents want to protect their children from that type of anguish, that type of raw pain. And that the issue is that we can't. And you can't fix grief. You just can't. It's not fixable. What we have to do is learn to metabolize it and integrate it into our lives. And that grief is going to change. Like Grace was talking about the fact that her dad died when she was 4, and now she's talking about this when she's 9. Well, her understanding as a 4-year-old is very different than her understanding as a 9-year-old, which means she's having to re-grieve it at the new developmental level that she's at. And this is going to continue to happen throughout her life. Each stage, she's going to have to reintegrate that into her thinking and into her life as she sees it, right? So I think that there are ways that we can help. I think grief literacy is important. I think the more we can prepare kids for it, the better off they are.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
Yeah. And Sue, I know you do a number of programs, and I'll let you talk about, so what are some of the programs that are happening at the Dr. Bob Kemp Hospice for children and families?
Sure. So one of the first things that we try and do when we get calls from families is we try and connect them. One of the things that seems to be the most valuable is they need to find their people. And it may not be their people that have had the same experiences, but similar experiences. And they're not the only kid whose dad has died, or they're not the only kid who's had a parent die. So some of the things that we do is we have our monthly family nights and game nights, and those are informal and they're for families to connect. We have our 6-week closed groups for children and youth, and we don't call them grief groups because nobody wants to come to a grief group. So we call them things like Cooking Up Care or Gaming Through Grief or Storytime Explorers. And the kids, they get to do an activity, but they talk about grief as well. We have our burger boxes for our newly bereaved families to provide tools, activities, books to help them get through the first few weeks after a death. We have Camp Keaton, which is our 3-day overnight camp. We take 50 kids to Bracebridge and do regular camp activities, but also very specific grief activities. We offer individual grief counseling for children, and we have our grief text line and online chat service. And so those are some of what we have to offer. And what we find, as I mentioned, is the connection is really the most valuable part of all of it.
That's so true. And I just want to jump in and introduce Amber Kuipers, who is a mom of 3, a paraeducator, and author of When Gray Came to Stay, which is currently a Canadian Book Club Award finalist. So congratulations. Amber's dad died when she was 17 years old, and she lost several other family members over the years and is continually learning how to live with grief. And I think that's beautiful, like living with grief. Amber is passionate about encouraging people to talk about their grief and all the messy feelings that come along with it. So welcome, Amber.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about, as you said, you're continuing learning to live with grief and you're trying to inspire. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my dad was killed in a farming accident. So very sudden, just your whole life flips around. And I think I felt even at the time, I had no idea what I was experiencing. I had no idea that grief looked like so much more than just sadness. I just assumed it was just sadness. It wasn't anger. It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't all those other complicated feelings. And I didn't realize how unpredictable grief is. And, talking about my dad is fine 1 minute, and then talking about him, an hour later, and I'm a mess. So I've really struggled with that over the years and how to navigate that. And just feeling like when I'm not grieving, did I forget my dad? Am I not honoring him if I'm not sad? And I've learned that grief doesn't go away. I'm not going to get over it, but it'll change. It'll still always be there and present, but it will change. And it will, you can kind of manage it a little bit better, or you learn to live with it, but it never really goes away.
Absolutely. And as a paraeducator and having experienced yourself, I heard the children talk about special occasions. They seem to come up a lot in there. And I used to also work with kids in schools. And I remember Mother's Day, particularly for kids, or Father's Day. What can we do do you think would be helpful for kids or even yourself when those special occasions come up? How can we, prepare ourselves to meet that day?
Yeah, so I've actually found in the past, sometimes it feels like the day itself isn't so hard. It's the build up around it and almost the anticipation of the day. And I've had to give myself permission to sit in all of those feelings and be okay with it's not going to be nice and I don't really know what's coming, and to just kind of sit in that and acknowledge it might be hard, it might not, and that's okay too. But I think being willing to just sit in those hard feelings and acknowledge, you know what, I'm really angry today. And I think it might be related to this upcoming event, or, you know, Father's Day, or those bigger events. I know for my wedding, for myself, not having my dad walk me down the aisle was devastating, absolutely devastating. And it does impact how I perceive the wedding and those different elements, but I felt like the actual walking down the aisle was okay. It was all the build up, all the thoughts, all the things around it. And I had to just sit in that, and I had to just, yep, this sucks. This is not how it should be. And kind of just, yeah, hang out there for a bit, which isn't easy for me, and it's not fun. But I've learned if I just stick it in a box and don't deal with it, that never ends well.
I think that the dominant messages to grievers is to just do that. And I think that that's why it's so important to have this conversation, is that it doesn't mean that you can't live full lives, like fall in love and get married and have children and have like this really robust life. But you know, you have to live alongside this kind of loss. And I think that is what the message we're all trying to talk about today, and dispel that kind of myth that, you know, like, why are you still over it? Or did you fail grief? Or, you know, that kind of stuff. And if you ever run into people kind of like saying things like what you would think was not helpful.
What would I say to them?
Yeah. Or did it ever happen to you? Like where you were like, you know, having a sad moment and someone said like, don't you think you should be over it? Or anything that wasn't helpful?
Yeah. And I think even someone, saying, well, it's been 6 months, I don't understand, or it's been a year, or, you know, yesterday we just talked about this and it was fine. How come it's not fine today? Or they're in a better place. It's not always very helpful to hear that because that may be true, that may be whatever, but I still have this gaping hole here. So you saying that isn't helping me live the realities of my day-to-day life in that. And I've had to learn over the years to own that my grief is my own, and how I experience and how I process is going to be different than my siblings, different than my mom. And I've had to just own, this is my grief.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about your book, like, you know, When Gray Came to Stay. So I'm assuming it was inspired by your personal life, but tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, so my dad died 15 years ago, which tells you how old I am. But I struggled with resources then. I found either books are really heavy and clinical and weren't necessarily practical or helpful, or still, I just had no idea. And over the years, I also realized people don't like talking about it. People don't like talking about death or death prep or anything like that. And I was the weirdo who was happily talking about what it looks like to plan a funeral or have these hard conversations. And when I had my own kids, it was really hard to explain to them what grief would look like. How do I explain the loss of someone they'll never meet? And how do I explain what that looks like? So the idea came to characterize grief as this kind of gray cloud that's with me all the time. And some days it gets bigger and darker, and I learn to cope with it in different ways, and I learn to kind of shrink it or live with it, but it's always present. So I just found that was really helpful for my kids to say, you know what, Mummy's gray is really big today. And they would be like how big and how dark? But I think the visual really helped them. And then this year, everything fell into place to write it into a book. And it was incredibly vulnerable and terrifying to put my grief out there for the world to see. The illustrator has actually illustrated my dad and my family right into the book, which was, I mean, if you don't know my family, you wouldn't know that, but it was really, really incredible for me. And I just kept telling myself, if it helps one kid feel less alone, because I think sometimes picture books can kind of take away all the extra language and provide this beautiful illustration that can kind of really simplify some of the messages. So yeah, it's been an amazing experience, and still terrifying a lot of the time. But if I can just help somebody else feel less alone or encourage conversations, let's start talking about it. Let's talk about the feelings that come with it. Then it's all worth it.
I think so too, and I think you really hit it when you said that doing things in stories, charactering, and because we sometimes talk about it, there is no language for grief, like they're really hard stuff. So sometimes putting it in kind of creative ways really, particularly for children. And Sue, like, do you resonate with what Amber is saying? Because I know that you use a lot of creativity in what you're doing and books, and I know you've got a number of books that you recommend as well. And how do you find children respond to that?
Well, I think the picture book idea is a great one, because kids don't really like to read. So it's great. It's great when the pictures actually can tell the story, and then the words are there to help illustrate it further. But the pictures really, in the book, the illustrations are really quite wonderful. I really enjoyed your Dad Adventure Days. Can you just talk about that for a minute?
Yeah. So I got really tired of always associating the anniversary of my dad's death with sadness and loss, because it felt like, that was in every element of my life. And my husband and my kids would never know him. And that really started to bother me. So one year we decided to grab all my dad's favorite snacks, and he liked very, very odd things and combinations, but he always had a ginger ale every day, and he loved Baby Bell cheese and icy square chocolates and different random things like that. And we would stock up, and my kids get so excited because they get a full pop that day, and they think it's the greatest thing, and unlimited cheese and chocolate. And my dad loved to learn. He was incredibly intelligent, was always taking us to like museums or whatever. So we pick an adventure to have on that day. We've gone to the ROM, the Science Center, different museums, or we do conservation areas or hikes. And we create our own memories that we know my dad would have had with us. And we've also done some childhood things that I did. Like I took my kids to Chuck E. Cheese because I remember having great memories there as a kid. And my kids, it's actually one of their favorite days. Like my son had to do a project on his favorite family tradition last year, and he picked Dad Adventure Day. And I think they love talking about the different memories and the different like pranks my dad would pull and those kind of things. And now it's become this day we all look so forward to. We all take it off work, and we skip school, and we have like a big day. And it's been so healing for my family and a way for me to introduce my dad to my kids, and the aspects of him I miss the most.
That's awesome. And I again, you what a great tradition. And one of the things, both of you can comment on is when we bring folks, we do memorials and different things. We often talk about bring their name into your daily living. Because sometimes, it used to be like when someone died, like you do not remember, like do not say that person's name in a circle again, or and how harmful that is. So I don't know, Sue or Amber, if you want to talk about like, why it's so important to naming the person, bringing them into your life, and not just kind of like, again, tucking it away that person's gone, and so we won't talk about it.
Well, I think certainly from my experience with the kids is that it allows them an opportunity just to keep remembering. And I forget what the quote is, but the last time a person says our name on the earth is the last time we're remembered. And so we just want to make sure we keep remembering them. And, traditions like at this time of the year that we're coming into the holidays, setting a place setting for them. Having those conversations, talking about those memories, making remember-alls, writing letters, and as Joey said, and burning it and sending it up, the smoke up. Those are all such important aspects of keeping those memories alive. And for some, like Grace, you think about, Grace has specific memories, like in the video, she has specific memories of treats, but her mom does a great job of helping her remember times and activities that her dad did with her. And so that helps keep that in her thought processes as well. I just think it's really valuable.
I think so too. And so I also wanted just to bring up like a thing that I think a lot of people don't really talk about, and I know Amber, you have raised it, is the idea of what we call them, some people call them stugs, like that's more of a, if you want to call it, technical term for it, and we call them grief burst. And what basically what it is that, you know, sometimes you're having a grand old day and you're driving along and you just, either it's a song that comes on the radio or you look over and the sun is shining a certain way, and all of a sudden you get flooded with that person and they're just so present in that moment with you, and then you just start crying and it just floods you over. So we call them grief burst here. And sometimes people think that if that happens to them and it's been 2 to 3 years later, that it's bad. It means they're not well. And we really try to dispel that myth. So I don't know if Amber or Sue, you can elaborate on that for our viewers.
Amber, please go ahead.
Yeah, I know for me, like it's been 15 years and I still get that. And it bothered me at first, thinking I should be past this. Like this should not be happening. And now it's almost a bit of a comfort thing to be like, they still mean that much to me. And it's a different kind of grief than I felt. You know, the first little bit, you can't breathe. You feel like, you know, you can't. And this one just I've learned the hard way. I've made lots of mistakes on the way to just kind of embrace those moments and to just remind myself, I hurt this way right now because I loved so hard and there was someone so important to me in my life. I mean, that doesn't always help in the moment. In the moment, it can be like, oh, more big feelings and I'm really tired of these. But I think, yeah, I still get those. I just had one a couple weeks ago. I've had a lot with the book coming out, a lot of these emotions I forgot existed and things like that. But I try to remind myself, and he will always be my dad. It doesn't matter how old I get. He will always be my dad.
Oh,
absolutely.
Claire, I think the other thing, I just wanted to add that, you know, we think that grief has a beginning and an end and that it's linear, and it's not. I mean, it does this, right? We don't have any control really when it comes right down to it. And it's just about making it a part of who we are now. And it's metabolizing it into how we, you know, are going to manage moving forward. And like, there are different types of grievers as well. I didn't know whether you wanted to talk about that for a minute or not, but with different types of grievers, you've got your intuitive grievers and your instrumental grievers, and they don't often match up. And sometimes what happens is we have parents that are instrumental grievers. So they're the doers. Give me a task, I'm going to do it. Let's build a fence. Let's distract ourselves. Let's do this. And then you've got the intuitive grievers, which are far more emotionally driven. And the difficulty is if you've got an adult that has an emotional grieving child, they don't recognize what's happening. And they just think this kid isn't grieving. Or why are they grieving so much? Like, get over it. Go do something, right? And I think that there are so many different subtle aspects to grief that people just don't fully understand. And that, you know, we continue to learn and develop information about. But with kids, a kid can puddle jump. So they're in their grief, and then they have this wonderful ability to be out of their grief. And the parents look at them like, what is wrong with this kid? Like they're not grieving. Well, they are, but they've had as much as they can manage right now. And now they're going to go play an hour of video games because that's the distraction, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's really important to know that, you know, as you said, we all grieve differently. And, you know, we do tend to have like kind of our go-to strengths when we're feeling. And the other thing is just reminding that grief hurts, and humans do have the ability to manage like real deep pain. Like we do have the capacity to do it. It just hurts. And there is, as you pointed out, there is no getting over hurt. You got to just kind of figure your way through it, right? And I think, you know, by pretending that the world is always not going to hurt at times, and we really rob grievers. But I wanted to just spend the last couple of minutes that we have talking about parenting. So we're talking about children and trying to understand. And I think from what our work is, we understand this idea that 1 minute a child's crying and then they're saying, hey, can we go for like a snack? And you're like, okay, that seems like a dichotomy, as you talked about the puddle jumping. And we know that's unique to children, and then that they may grieve differently. But they also have to go to school with children who may not have experienced them. And I think one of the young gentlemen talked about, doesn't want to be the kid that doesn't, the father died, and they have to kind of go through that piece. But then there's the parent part. So when you are a parent and you are grieving, let's say it could be your partner or your child who might have passed away, and now you're grieving the loss of that relationship, and you're trying to support your child through their grief. Tell us a little bit about what can we tell parents who are going through that piece?
Me?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I think one of the most important things is to talk about it, and it's to make sure that everybody in the family is kind of on the same page in terms of talking. We don't do our best parenting during that time, and it's okay that we don't do our best parenting. And just say, I can't be the best parent you need me to be right now. But I think parents sometimes are afraid to cry in front of their children. And I think that we do the kids a disservice if we don't, because I think it's important that they know that parents have feelings, and that sometimes we're hurting. And it's okay to say to them, I really miss daddy right now. And I just need to cry a little bit. Come and we'll cry together, or however that needs to look for them. But I think the more we try and extricate kids from it, the worse it becomes, because they start to fill in the blanks, and they'll fill them in wrongly. And so then they make it like way worse than it really would need to be if somebody just sat and talked to them about it and explained and warned them. And so if it's anticipatory grief, warn them. This is going to be one of the worst feelings you're ever going to feel. But we're here to support you, and we're going to help you get through it. And parents need to do the same thing. I've worked with families through those processes, and the outcome is phenomenal when they work together as a family. It really, really is. And I think different styles of grieving too. And it's important to identify, okay, my kid is a doer, I'm an emoter, this isn't going to work. So yeah. I need to figure out how to balance that out. And it doesn't mean my child isn't grieving if they need to do something, right? Absolutely. It just means that's how they're processing it. Amber, do you have something to add? Oh, sorry, Claire.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I've kind of been on both ends. Like we've lost great grandparents that my kids had a relationship with. So there was a bit of navigating that. And then also being the child, having lost a parent. And even now, when my mom talks about my dad, even when she says, I can't do this because that's really hard, it's very comforting to me in a way. Like even just the openness and the acknowledgement of like, she still has these difficult feelings. I still have these difficult feelings. We're together, but separate in our grief. And my husband and I try really hard to just allow our kids to ask anything, especially death related, because I think they experience a lot of fear about now, like you're getting sick. We've seen sick people die, like it happen. Some of their questions, I wish we didn't give them the freedom to ask when they ask, like, what exactly happens to a body when it's in the ground? Yeah. But those are the questions they have and they want to know. So I think, yeah, expressing your feelings and being open with your kids. Today is a hard day. Like I miss this or that. But I think also allowing them to ask any question they have that's death related, even if it seems, ridiculous or sometimes very uncomfortable or morbid. I think we still have to allow kids to ask that and open up the space and be willing to say, I don't know, but I will find out.
Yeah, that's really good. And what do you guys, Amber and Sue, I will throw this out for you too. What do you think we can do for kids in school, right? So how can we better equip the school to manage grievers? Like, like I said, to think that, we don't have children that are in the school system that are grieving losses. And if we make them invisible, then we're not creating the kind of environment they need to sort of thrive. So what do you think we could do? Because I'm not blaming schools. I don't want to leave anyone with that idea, because I think we live in this kind of death phobic culture, right? And so we don't want to talk about it anywhere. But because we're talking specifically about children, what are some of the things you think we can do that's better? And I'll do Amber first and then Sue.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that the key there is talk. I think we need to just start talking about it more and embrace those conversations. We need more resources. I'm a little biased because I wrote a picture book, but we need more books like that are less clinical, because at least when I was a kid, I wasn't going to go look for the grieving resources that said, I'm a grieving child on the front, right? Yeah. So, and I feel like literature is such a powerful tool, and we are getting better at having great literature that tackles hard topics without making it seem like a clinical book. But I think we need to have more of that. And I think kids need to know that they can talk about it, but aren't going to be forced to. Because I know my school, when I experienced grief, did their best, but some people were a little pushy. You need to talk about it right now. And it was like, I'm not ready, but it's good to know that you're there.
Yeah.
I think just talking about grief, and it's more than just a death. And I think especially now with COVID, we have all this kind of grief and all these feelings. So I think we have to get a little bit better at just sitting in them and embracing them and acknowledging grief is not just sadness. Grief is a multitude of emotions all the time.
Yeah. I agree.
And it's not just death related, right? Yeah. It can be related to so many different things. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. And just to sort of jump off on what you're saying, I think you're right. There aren't enough resources. There aren't enough resources in the schools. And my experience is I do get social workers reaching out saying, I'm not sure how to talk about this with them. Mm-hmm. And what do you suggest? And there are some great books for all ages to be able to draw from. And so there's opportunities there. And I think we just have to let people, people are afraid of it. And so we have to try and encourage people not to be so afraid of it, and to really just tackle it head on, because the kids really do want to know. They're really keen and quite interested, and they want that information. One of the things that I found with the kids who I've worked with is I will tell them that I will always be honest with them. Sometimes it will be really hard, but I will be here to support them. Is that what they would like? I will offer it as a question. And 100% of the time, those kids have said, I want you to be honest with me. And so that's what we've done.
Yeah, I really seen that have such a big impact, because we're here at the hospice, and we do a lot of end of life care for folks, and that includes parents with children of all ages. And I do recall that sometimes, like as a parent is losing their spouse, they're just they're trying to manage their own loss around their spouse going, and their fears about, oh my goodness, I'm going to be parenting children without my spouse that I thought I'd always be here. And so they sometimes don't even tell their children what is coming. They don't even tell them what a hospice is. And then the children come in and then they're literally, well, I thought mom was coming here just like the hospital, but, not prepared. And I think that, what Sue has done, and again, I'm not blaming parents, because we don't have enough grief literacy out there, and we don't openly talk about these things, that the parent is doing the best they can with what they know, and they're trying to hold everything together. So getting supports earlier on is so important, but having this important conversation. And I completely agree, having more resources and books like Amber's book, and I know that Sue, you have a whole bunch of other books, a Heroes comic book that and we've got Invisible String. So stories do really help people really deal, and we all know that art has always been able to help us tackle things that, again, we don't have words for, or just too difficult. And so it's 12:14, and we wanted to have this session for 45 minutes, and we really want to thank everybody for coming, but continue to talk, continue to be open. I really we're going to put some resources on our website, including Amber's books and some of the other books that Sue has out there. And let's keep talking and supporting, and thank the brave children who spoke up, and thank you for being so vulnerable with us today too, Amber. And we look forward to your next book.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
guys. Take
Thanks
care.
very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.